What's up, guys? How's it going? All right, I know it's been a long time since I posted or recorded a video. There's been some reasons for that. I actually do have a fantastic video waiting in the wings that I recorded with my very good friend and Magic collaborator, Nate Prodzik, when I was visiting him in Hawaii roughly, I think, a month ago or so. And we have the extra treat of Nate on the call right now to help us record another video. Nate, you want to say hi?
Hey,
Um, Some of you may know Nate from his channel, which is sort of a nice complementary channel to the one that I've been curating for a long time. He and I collaborate on a lot of our deck lists. Actually, the main difference is Nate tends to hyper specialize on one deck list and just play the shit out of it, whereas I tend to bounce around between usually 4 or 5 different designs. And for the last bunch of years, Nate's pet project has been his Brea deck, which he's played to a high level of success, but also to increasing amounts of frustration over the last, I would say, what would you say, last year or so, year and a half?
yeah, last year.
Yeah, this is
Just
the deck just for reference for anyone who's curious about it. You can definitely go to Nate's channel if you want to check out the contents of it. But basically, despite all of Nate's work, all of his expertise with this deck, and the and now probably 27 years of control deck experience that he's devoted to playing Magic, no amount of play skill or ingenuity allows you to circumvent a fundamental problem with the format, which, well, has just become increasingly untenable for Nate and kind of for me too, honestly. One of the reasons why I haven't played a ton of Magic lately is because, I mean, I've been playing other games, but I really haven't felt like there's been a lot of interesting things going on in the commander space for a while, and there's been steady power creep in the format that has accelerated the format and really removed a lot of the great interactivity, which is kind of one of the things I really liked so much about it, and I know that Nate shares my opinions. So a couple days ago, on the tail end of Nate sending me probably a good 2 dozen messages lamenting stuff that he was getting destroyed by with his Brea deck and how he just felt like he couldn't win any games, I made a suggestion. I said, "Hey Nate, why don't we put our heads together and why don't we start it? Why don't we utilize what feels like the most powerful tools that are available in the format and the most degenerate strategies, and that's partners and well, we've sort of found our way to black red." And a deck that you see in front of you, which Nate came up with the perfect title for it just a few minutes ago. We're calling this deck BullSzat. It is pure BullSzat, and I think that anybody who faces this deck and anybody who's played against it, at least constructed the way that we've built it, I think will walk away with those very same sentiments. So I'm just going to go over the deck real quick. Nate, you're welcome to interject whenever you want to. For starters, of course, we're abusing the partner command, the partner mechanic. Um, Forgive me for stumbling on my words and stuff. I'm pretty tired. I had a long weekend. But yeah, I think one of the biggest problems with Commander right now, particularly in 1v1 Commander, is the partner mechanic. And in fact, if I remember correctly, partners are banned from the 1v1 format that's actually curated and still available in the dark vestiges of Magic Online for maybe the 3 people who still care about that format. But they realized pretty quickly that when you want one versus one interactive games, it's really pretty much incompatible with the partner mechanic. And it just gives you too much leverage, the extra free card, the synergy between the commanders. It's too deterministic and really kind of prices out and outcompetes the regular, somewhat fair commanders. And by nature of the fact that you get unfair synergies and you just get an extra card every single game. And while that's already problematic in decks like Thrasios and Timna, it is way, way, way more insane in this deck. And the reason is because of this little sumbitch right here. Rogra, son of Roga. You get an 8th card that's a creature that costs 0. And if you give your opponent a 0 mana creature in their hand every single game, there are so many ways to abuse the shit out of that. And the fact that he costs 0 and then only 2 and then only 4 allows you to run him out and use him multiple times. And of course, the best pairing with him, another partner, is this guy, Tavish Zat, Doom of Fools, which I remember actually I read a Reddit article about this a couple days ago when I was actually researching some stuff that might go into the deck. And there was a long Reddit thread that was discussing Tavish Zat and how good he really was. And it was really evident to me, this was in the CEDH Reddit subreddit as well, and it was really evident to me that people right out of the gates did not appreciate how good he was. A lot of people were like, 5 mana for a thing that spits out some thralls. And I think it's taken some time for people to really truly appreciate how degenerate Tavish-Zat is. And of course, the obvious pairing with him is Rogra. I think you could probably pair him with a few other commanders. Maybe something like, I don't know, what do you think? Vile Smasher, maybe? You could go with Vile Smasher, you could go with Timna.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something that would give you like access to colors that you want, but
yeah, but at the end of the day, the really abusive interaction is Tavish-Zat alongside a 0-mana commander, and that just allows you to not only to devote your entire deck to just getting Tavish-Zat into play as quickly as possible while disrupting the opponent. It's kind of in the same way that Zur does that, and Zur is very effective. The huge difference, of course, is that Zur is a 3-color deck that requires you to attack in order to actually have the commander work. And, because you're playing blue, you don't have... all the interactive mechanisms are different. You're playing basically a counterspell deck, and you really need to balance mana development with interaction and countering and removal and kind of all the same things that beleaguer Brea, versus this deck, which is just totally straightforward, crush your opponent mercilessly game after game after game. And I've played the deck about 15 times now. I haven't even come close to losing a game against anyone. Nate has played way more games than me, probably 40 to 50 at this point. He's lost a handful of games as the deck was developing and we were working on the strategy. I would say this is maybe version 3 or 4.0. And one of Nate's biggest strengths, I think, as a Magic player and as a deck builder is he's just tireless and uncompromising in fine-tuning. And so he'll always go and just basically say, I've won a bunch of games in a row, but I've had these kind of case instances where it didn't feel like it felt like I had these I had a certain deficit that was making it hard for my deck to deal with this sort of thing. So I'm gonna not be satisfied. Even though I'm winning all the games, I want to win more. I want to win better. I want to win more effectively, and that means I'm going to keep making changes. And that compelled Nate to probably shift around 10 or so cards from our earlier design, which had far more creatures in it. We had a bunch of kind of the good, obvious red and black creatures in the deck, mostly red stuff that kind of seemed like it went along with the theme. But once you start to play a few games and you start to really understand what makes this deck win and what fundamentally matters, nearly all of those creatures fall by the wayside. You can see that we've removed everything but just a handful of guys. Dark Confidant's in here because it's one of the best 2-drops ever made, if not the best. We've got Ragavan, of course.
The best 1-drop ever made.
The best 1-drop ever made by far, yeah. Power Creep Incarnate. And then at 3 mana, we have Opposition Agent, Mr. Bullshit. Completely stupid card and perfectly suited to a deck called BullSzat. And then finally, we've got the, the Murderous Rider, which is barely a creature anyway. Just interactivity with a Planeswalker. And honestly, this is probably one of the weaker cards in the deck. The thing is that you kind of want this effect. You want something like a Bedevil or Hero's Downfall. The fact that Murderous Rider already does that, and in addition to the fact that it can be just a nice little death touch creature or whatever with lifelink in a pinch, probably makes it better than those 2 cards. And you don't really want a ton of those effects, as we've discovered pretty quickly. You're kind of going for more endgame, drop huge bombs on your opponent than deal with their stuff 1-to-1. But Murderous Rider kind of slots in there. It may get ultimately replaced. I would say it's near the top of the bubble in terms of cards that are weaker. But the rest of the deck is really just there to support the theme. This entire deck revolves around get Tavish-Zat out as quickly as possible and brutalize your opponent with the interaction of him and Rogra to just cast Ancestral Recall every single turn. And this deck has so much disruption of both hand and artifact mana base, as well as ultimately land attack. You're attacking in 3 different directions simultaneously while drawing tons and tons of free cards. And it is, barring a tiny range of your opponent being able to do things, it's almost impossible for the opponent to keep up. It's just so insanely brutal. And we encountered this, of course, in all of those games. Well, at least you did, because you're playing CEDH every game. Nate was playing all these competitive EDH games against this deck or various incarnations of it, or just incarnations of various partners' decks while getting increasingly frustrated. And my suggestion was, listen, if there's all these abusive tools in the format, why the hell are we not using them all? If winning is the goal, right? If we want to win games in the most effective fashion, which is what we want to do as Spikes, why are we not using all the best cards? It just doesn't even make any sense. And I think of all the new tools that have come into the format, particularly cards like Deflecting Swat and, of course, the Jeweled Lotus over there. Just various tools that have come into the format over the last couple of years. I would say that this deck is the best deck that I can think of that leverages those. Certainly of Jeweled Lotus. Like, there's a lot of insane things you can do with Jeweled Lotus. You can put out Grand Arbiter Augustin really quick. There's a few other good commanders, maybe an Azami, What are some other good commanders that you can put out for?
Yeah,
For two lows?
even when it even felt broken when we were like discounting Zur by two, just to get him down like turn two instead of turn three or turn four or whatever.
Yeah,
And obviously, like, he attacks and gets necro, so it felt completely degenerate in that deck. But that feels horribly slow compared to what this deck does.
yeah, unbelievably slow. Like you're just playing a different format, and that's really, that your deck's just really broken bullshit when you're playing against other decks that seemingly seem good, like Gitrog Monster, for example, which was giving you fits for weeks when you were
Right.
playing against it with Brea. We played against the Gitrog Monster deck and just smashed that guy like 4 or 5 games in a row, obliterated him, including a game where we have that game actually in the pipeline. I shouldn't even spoil it. There's a game that nearly any deck would have instantly scooped to. We crushed him anyway.
Yeah.
Totally insane. So a deck like Gitrog Monster, right? Yeah, fine. I mean, it can do nasty things around turn 3, turn 4. You're already dead against this deck most of the time, and there's no escaping its tools. It's so deterministic. The card draw is so powerful with the tutoring. Your opponent can't keep creatures or artifacts in play against you. You just murder everything they do. You destroy their hand, and then you just get further and further and further ahead. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the best Jeweled Lotus deck in the format. It abuses a
Might
bunch
be
of
the
other.
best.
What's that?
Frank, not to, I mean, yeah, I didn't mean to totally interrupt, but I was thinking this might be one of, if not the best decks that we've built in terms of, if you're just looking at pure degenerate power levels, because I've never seen a deck, as far as I can remember, and you and I have been playing since, I think,
More than 12 years, I think, of
yeah,
Commander.
in terms of Commander. But I mean, this deck is a deck that its average by turn 2 you are winning the game, like basically every game.
Yeah, substantially, and not against just random competition. These are opponents who are experienced, who are joining a game that specifically says competitive EDH. So it's not like you're just going against random chaff. You're going up against the best people who play on Magic Online, playing this format with the best decks that they have.
Right.
But it's just like a giant buzzsaw that just rips them to shreds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the original inspiration for this was Dots, DAWTS.
Yeah.
For me at least. I kind of looked at what he was doing, and then I just kind of to get started, it was like, okay, I need a foundation, right? You need some kind of give me like a basic skeleton of what this deck should look like. And I looked at his deck, which was really good and was crushing Brea over and over.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, if we pull out the wheat from the chaff here, how many slots do we have left? And I was surprised that while he has a ton of really good cards in his deck, and it's a very well built, difficult to defeat deck, there was still lots of slots left for us to play with, and that actually was what got me excited, because I love collaborating with you, Brian. So it was like, hey, if we have room to do something with this, let's see what we can do.
Totally. Yeah, and I would say that obviously that's one of the biggest challenges with building any competitive commander deck in the first place, or really any commander deck at all. But certainly if you're playing hyper competitive strategies, there isn't really a lot of room to screw around and play with pet cards and pet strategies and things like that. You have to kind of keep the foremost goal in mind the whole time whenever you are deciding whatever cards to put in. And therefore, I think you probably have an overlap with Dots' deck of probably 70-75% of the spells. But that said, he's much more creature heavy. He's got a lot more. He has different planeswalkers. He's got, I think, just a higher top end in general in his deck, it seems. We tend to build decks that are really, really low to the ground in Commander. And as you can see, we've got 32, 39 cards from a range of 0 up to just 2 mana. And the curve really almost does end at 3. There's a little bit of higher end stuff, despite the fact that we run these big mana cards. But the whole idea, of course, is you don't want to draw. You have so little control over what order you draw these things in a lot of the time that if you put too many of the big things in your deck and you just draw them at the beginning of the game alongside mana, you think that those hands are going to work. And so you keep them because you've got 3 land and 4 spells. But if you're not doing anything until turn 3 or turn 4, a lot of competitive decks will have already killed you by the time you get there. And so you really got to have that acceleration and interaction right at the very start, and really pack your deck with lots of those effects. And you don't really need, provided you have lots of ways of drawing cards, you don't really need that many big, powerful finishers anyway. Just a handful of things to kind of shut the game down is usually enough to win. And but there's some really interesting, there's some cool brand new things in here that that I have never played with. I didn't even know that these cards existed. So, for example, Jessica's Will, which was incredibly expensive online, which was a pretty good indicator of how good it really is. Completely insane card. If you control a commander, you can cast a spell, or you can, yeah, you get one of the effects. If you control a commander, you get both. And of course, when you have a commander that costs 0, that means that you pretty much always have access to Jessica's Will. Both sides of it, at least. And it's completely bonkers, right? Add red for each card in your opponent's hand. Exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. This card is often like Ancestral Recall plus generate 4 or 5 additional mana. Totally, utterly insane, and combines with so many different things in the deck. I wasn't sold on it right away, but the more I think about this card, it is... The thing is that at its worst case scenario, later on in the game, like let's say your opponent has an empty hand, well, you still get to draw 3 cards with it for 3 mana. That's not horrendous at all. That's and this deck is super proactive, so you can probably use the cards anyway. And if you draw it, if you cast it early off of any kind of acceleration, it's utterly insane because you always have your commander. So you always get 3 cards and you get all the mana you need to play them. Totally, utterly broken. Some other cards. There's this card called You Find Some Prisoners, which really interesting, flexible card. Allows you to just shatter if you need to, which of course you can't usually have enough effects like that. And then you've got this interrogate thing, which is an impulse for your opponent, top of your opponent's deck. I would say this card is, I'm not 100% sold on it, given the fact that you, I don't know, looking at the top 3 of your opponent's cards, it's kind of decent. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, but the flexibility, the modality of it to use it to shatter, as well as get card advantage potentially, I think is pretty good. And a very important point that Nate made when he first started to include it is that it does brick tutors. If your opponent is playing with any of those, put a card on top of their deck tutors, and they don't play it correctly, i.e. they don't do it in response to their draw step, then you can, and no one would ever expect it, then you can find some prisoners and steal the card that they just tutored for, which is often enough to just win the game. We do have Ragavan in here, completely broken, insane, stupid card. It's like Red's version of the Sarah Ascendant, probably better actually, other than the fact that it doesn't have evasion, but just completely stupid. If you play it on turn 1 and your opponent doesn't answer it, you almost always just win the game immediately. And then what else we got over here on the higher? We've got Deadly Rollick, another kind of commander-based free spell, because they keep making free spells alongside Deflecting Slot. If you control a commander, and lo and behold, it's pretty easy to control your commander. That's the other thing, too, about Rograz, that not only does it cost 0 to deploy, but people just don't kill him. It feels so bad to use up a spell on a 0-drop commander that most of the time people just leave him in play. And that doesn't mean that you should just play Rograz all the time right away. But if you do, most of the time your opponent will just ignore it, and you can get all the benefit of having a commander in play for 0 mana, which is pretty disgusting. We even run Lion's Eye Diamond in here, and you definitely know one of Nate's rules about this card is that if Lion's Eye Diamond is good in your deck, then your deck is probably doing some degenerate bullshit things.
Yeah.
I mean, without exception. And yeah, it's totally insane. We have Jeweled Lotus and Lion's Eye Diamond, so you just power out Tavish-Zat. Because Rograz is in the command zone, your Ancestral is just waiting in the wings. You can immediately repair your hand. And then the deck is basically just, once that engine is running, you just strip your opponent of answers, you destroy all their artifacts, and then you just set up the kill spell in the deck, which is actually over here. It's the black X spell, Death Cloud, which definitely kills your opponent every time you play it. It's utterly insane how many games you just win with Death Cloud. You just, because they never have any artifacts in play. So you just cast Death Cloud, and yeah, they lose their hand, all their lands, and all their creatures, and they're dead. And it's basically just over on the spot. Sometimes there might be a pesky Planeswalker in play, but you're so far ahead at that point that dealing with the Planeswalker is usually pretty trivial.
Yeah, most of the time the pesky Planeswalker is yours.
Yeah, that's true. It's still sticking around. Exactly, and Tavish-Zat has the ability to just ramp up anyway. And you can win the game that way, too, by just stealing their commander after you've Death Clouded the whole board. Which, it's an alternate win condition, but most of the time people just scoop to the Death Cloud, and that's the end of it. So without further ado, I wanted to cover a couple of games here, and we'll jump into the first game, and then we'll make a separate video against about the second game. You can see this is Nate's evolution of the deck. Lots and lots of games here, starting what is today, the 6th? So that was starting yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you can see, all these losses, and then suddenly we switch decks somewhere right around there.
So there's like, I think somewhere, I think it was, loss. This is where I was like getting sick of it. And I talked to you.
Yeah,
and
that's when we had our phone call.
This is like a 20-minute conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought about it for about 5 hours, and I couldn't sleep. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do what Brent said, put the deck together, a template, and then it was hard to stop playing.
Yeah, because it's just so insanely fun.
Yeah, and that was not the best version.
No, and it was evolving, but evolving into its true form. And it's probably, my suspicion is we're probably, keep in mind, this is a work in progress. It's probably 2 to 3, maybe even more, maybe 3 to 4 cards different from what will probably be its final form, at least for a while. There's a few things that I'm not completely convinced belong in the deck, and we're more than open to suggestions about specific tools that might make the deck work better, at least further its aims better. I think cards like, you find some prisoners, not crazy about that card. I'm not crazy about Murderous Rider. There might be something better, but overall, I think we've definitely moved in the right direction, and the deck is just performing brilliantly. So let's cue up that game. We're going to first show you a game, a demonstration of just its pure raw power, what this deck can do, and then we'll follow up with a game that was tightly contested.
All right, so I'll step through. You just give me a nod when you want to continue.
Yeah, I have the deck built both on Magic Online and in paper already. My version is one card different from Nate's. I'm currently running a black-red dual land, one of the Swamp Mountain fetchables, in place of the City of Traders. I'm not convinced my decision is correct yet, but I haven't seen any evidence that the City of Traders is really that important, but we haven't really had problems with color screw either. I mean, obviously the deck is mostly mono black, just a little red splash and a couple of cards that cost double red, so it's been pretty easy to get away with the red component so far.
And I think hands like this, Obvious has multiple ways to do, disgusting things, but if we literally mulliganed to 2. And all we had was Lotus, City of Traders as the only 2 cards that we kept.
You'd probably still very happy. You'd be favored.
Yeah, we'd be heavily favored.
Yeah, exactly. It's just totally insane.
Right.
Yeah, and we're up against Korvold, Fae-Cursed King. This deck, I've featured this commander a few times actually in matches that I've been on the losing side of it, or at least the struggling side. So it absolutely gives control decks fits. It's a pain in the ass commander to deal with. And BullSzat doesn't give a shit about that creature. It costs 5 mana, which prices it out of nearly anything that we have to deal with. So I think we're going first here. This hand is insane in Snap Keep.
Yeah.
So 2 different directions, right, Nate? We can play City of Traders into Jeweled Lotus and just play Tavish that on turn 1 and immediately Ancestral. The other option is to go a little bit slower route. And I guess you could play Sulphur Springs into Chrome Mox, imprint Fiery Covenant, play Jeweled Lotus and cast Tavish that way on turn 1. Either way works well, but I think you ultimately go with the latter play, right? Because it's probably a little safer.
So I guess he's leading off. That's funny thing is, I guess if you duress here like the Jeweled Lotus, how fast could we get the commander down?
Well, we don't have enough mana to even play the commander yet.
Pretty fast, but no duress forthcoming.
No. Fiery Confluence, yep.
All right, so going with the latter play.
Yeah, and I like how our opponent plays a Mana Elf, and we just happily throw a Fiery Covenant into the bin. Where we're going, we don't need effects like that. So Tavish that. And this might look like an anomalous hand in the sense that we've got, turn 1 commander. I assure you it is not an anomaly. A good third of the games you have something like this happen, given all the different mechanisms in the deck to generate fast mana.
Yeah, it feels like about a third of the games is turn 1, a third is turn 2, and a third is turn 3, or something along those lines. Like it's really well. Tavish hits the board by turn 3. I mean, there might be like a 1 or 2% where that doesn't happen, but that's extremely rare, right? Like this is a consistent turn 2 commander deck that sometimes hits it on turn 1 and sometimes hits it on turn 3.
Exactly. So we're gonna sacrifice Roga, draw 3 immediately, just ancestral right off the bat, and run into Crypt plus Rakdos Signet.
Seems good.
Yeah, seems effective. He does have a nice little ignoble hierarch there, though, going first.
So it feels like we're on turn 5 in terms of development.
And you also have Necropotence here on next turn if you needed it. But this deck is so consistent and fast. I mean, how many of those games have you even played Necro in?
I think
we didn't play it in any of the games that I played or any of the games that I watched you play.
The only times it's ever come up is either like you ritual it out, or like as a like they're playing like say in the mirror match where you're destroying tons of permanents and you like vampiric tutor and then just go get necro and blow them out that way. Yeah. Like I haven't ever had it come up otherwise.
Well, I also wanted to add this is the best Mox Opal deck in the format too, and Mox Opal's I'm sorry, not Mox Opal, Mox Amber. Mox Amber is another just completely insane, ridiculous card that was printed recently. And before you jump ahead, I'm just going to talk about it. Yeah, completely insane, ridiculous card, right? And works pretty well when you have a 0 mana commander. So our opponent, seemingly in desperation to grind away all the cards that we just drew, cast Wheel of Fortune. And yeah, it sucks to lose.
This makes sense.
I mean, sucks to lose Necro, Deathclad, Fiery Confluence, and Duretti, but we'll see what we get.
All of our best cards.
Yeah, some of the best cards. Off
or,
we go.
You know, well, I guess there's a few other cards.
We could draw into some other stuff. Oh my goodness. All right, so he passes back.
Oh my goodness.
Just redundant hymn to Torak. So look at the combo. We have Jessica's Will and Mind Twist. Jesus Christ, this is so stupid. All right, go ahead.
All right.
So lead with the Soul Ring, play the Mox Amber,
yeah.
Play Urza's Saga. Presumably, I guess we're just going to cast the Jessica's Will right now. Oh yeah, that's right. This is better than doing this because you play Jessica's Will in case we flip more land, of course.
Right.
So we get 3 cards. We get Arcane Signet and Wasteland.
And our mana pool over here.
We have 8 mana. That seems like a nice little setup there. So
we haven't Ancestraled yet.
Oh yeah, and that's right. We haven't even Ancestraled yet. We have enough mana also to replay Roga and sack him to draw 3 more. But first you got to play the Wasteland and the Arcane Signet. So I'm going to do that.
All right, so this is just, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And just tap some mana here. Yeah, nice Wheel of Fortune there, bro. Mindless for 7. Absolutely insane. Oh, he's got Jessica's Will also.
Oh, look.
Yeah, and of course he's extremely dead. And by the way, this is turn 2.
Yeah, this is turn 2, and there's an Ancestral Recall about to happen.
Yeah, and you still can Ancestral because Roga only costs 2 mana.
Play the Roga, Ancestral, and then if we have nothing better to do, strip mine.
Right, Wasteland away, I guess probably the Bayou. But yeah, well, you guys get the idea. Totally insane, pure BullSzat. And I think, Nate and I were talking about this before. We built a deck a long time ago when we first started playing Commander that was based around Griselbrand. Because when Griselbrand was printed, it was legal for a short time as a Commander. And Nate, right away, I was still playing just the regular control strategies and stuff. And Nate said, we got to just build a Griselbrand deck. The card's so insane. All you have to do is just get it into play and you just win instantly. It doesn't matter what their strategy is. And you can just ignore nearly every deck in the format. So we set about building that and had a version of Griselbrand that, barring your opponent drawing a bunch of disruption and counters, could usually get Griselbrand into play by turn 2. Sometimes it took till turn 3, but it was a completely insane, stupid deck. And then they rightfully banned Griselbrand about a week later.
I actually have a copy of the deck and a couple screenshots from that era.
Oh, do you really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm
glad you preserved this.
Finished version. I mean, and you can see how much worse it is in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, just consider the era too, right? This is so long ago.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't remember when. I mean, this is literally a different version of Magic Online.
Right.
So that says it all. But you can see we were running random janky shit like Cloud Key and stuff in the deck because it was just total, and Helm of Awakening. It was just totally about, and Bubbling Muck. How fast can you get, and Reign of Filth, how fast can you get Grizzlebrand into play? But once you get Grizzlebrand into play, you just draw 14 cards or draw 21 cards instantly, play a million other cards from your hand and blow them out and kill them instantly.
And I think I have an example here. Here's this start.
Oh, opening hand, Lotus Blossom.
Right.
Oh, remember when people used to play Janara? I haven't played against Janara in so long.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I haven't seen that in forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, a really like nuts start, but you know, okay, whatever. Another. So I actually labeled what came down on turn 1 and what came down on turn 2.
Oh, yeah. I can see that T1, T1, T1. Yeah, Soul Ring, Ancient Tomb, Helm of Awakening, Mind Stone. Okay, the Lotus was turn 2. Priest of Gix, also turn 2. And then you can see you've drawn yourself down to 8 life. Your opponent just took his second turn.
Yeah,
and you got a million cards. So this deck was insane, right? But it was very, very much a one-trick pony, very fragile, and I honestly think would not be able to hold up or stand up in modern competitive Commander due to how many free spells there are now and how easy it is to stop somebody who goes all in on an 8-mana Commander. This deck is seemingly impossible to stop. I don't even know what strategy beats this. I can't think of anything that deals with it consistently. Certainly blue is not your answer. And an early version of my build actually had both Red Blast and Pyroblast in the deck. And Nate said, you know, honestly, you want to play against blue with this deck. Like that's the deck you actually want to face with it, and you don't need Red Blast and Pyroblast to beat blue with this. It's so impossible to deal with everything that it's doing already, and that's been borne out in the results that we've had so far. There's no way that a blue deck can contain what this deck does, and you cannot win once Zat resolves. If you're playing blue, you just die to the commander single-handedly. It just gets so many cards. It gets you so many cards so fast. It's impossible to contain it with counterspells.
Yeah, and so many of the like solutions that would normally be really punishing if you were playing like say Brea. Null Rod, the green creature who acts like a Null Rod, the 2/2. There's Pithing Needle, naming Tevesh Szat or Brea or whatever. But they're all artifacts or creatures. This deck just does not care about those whatsoever.
Yeah, it just murders all that stuff.
Does not, Brea would get punished by Blood Moon. At one point we were running Blood Moon until we realized we didn't need it.
Yeah.
Right, the problem is like the hosers against this deck all are playing into the deck's strengths. I guess, isn't there a 2-mana white enchantment that's like a Null Rod?
Yeah,
I think that would probably be
Stony Silence would be probably the closest thing to completely crippling you. An enemy Karn the Great Creator is pretty nasty also.
Yeah.
But we are running 34 mana for 34 actual lands, which is on the high end for the decks that we tend to build. They tend to be 30 to 31 mana. I guess my Nin deck runs 32, but Brea has run anyway as few as 28 and as many as 31, I think. And having those 3 extra lands certainly helps with that a little bit. But barring a tiny, tiny range of not too often played permanents, there really just aren't that many. There just aren't any cards in the format that can handle what this deck does. They can't handle its speed. They can't deal with the disruption. They can't deal with the card drawing engine, and certainly can't deal with being death clouded for everything by the third or the fourth turn of the game. So. Anyway, this is already a pretty long video, so I'm gonna cut this one off here. We got one more video to record in a second clip coming up. But if you stuck around this long, thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for games from both Nate and me as we move forward, featuring the ever-evolving BullSzat deck. This deck is so good. See you guys later.
Bye.